I've never been to Thailand, but in my mind's eye, I imagine that it's a place of exotic gardens, lush, beautiful greens. I can imagine myself walking through a bazaar and seeing the beautiful fabrics and silks that are for sale, and maybe taking time to taste some of the aromatic foods. I'd love to visit a Buddhist shrine. But there's another Thailand, and it's the Thailand that Mai lives in. Mai is a mother with 4 young children, and she lives in extreme poverty. One morning she gets up to prepare breakfast, and she only has 1 egg. So she cooks that egg, and she divides it among her 4 children. But Mai's problems run deeper than that. She's about to give birth, and she knows she doesn't have the money to feed 1 more child. So when that baby is born, Mai does what many of us would think is unthinkable. She sells that baby, Ellie, a little girl, to human traffickers so that she can feed her other children. I stand before you today as an unwilling expert in human trafficking and as a really mad mom. I'm both an unwilling expert and a really mad mom because trafficking touched my family. Now, there are a couple of things I'd like you to remember when you leave today. One of them is that human trafficking is far, far larger than most of us realize. But on the other hand, it's much, much closer than most of us would care to admit. And finally, and most importantly, the thing that I would like you to remember is that each and every one of you can be the hope for someone that's caught in the web of human trafficking. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time today talking about numbers and statistics, but there are a couple that I want to share with you. The first one is $90. $90. If you have $90, you can buy another human being. That's the going price today globally to buy a person. $90. And if you're a human trafficker, that's a pretty good investment for your business. If you're a sex trafficker, for instance, unlike guns or drugs, a human being can be sold over and over and over again. And that $90 investment will net you about $23,000 a year on that one person. The other number that I'd like to share with you is 21 million. 21 million is about how many people we know that are trafficked globally every year. Now, 21 million is kind of a hard number to imagine, so let me give you this image. It would be as if someone took the entire nation of Australia and enslaved them. That's what 21 million looks like. Now, in the past 3 years, I've asked every teacher, every medical professional, every first responder that I've met, have you ever received any training in recognizing the signs of human trafficking? And no one has ever said yes. I find that unacceptable. One of the reasons that I find that unacceptable is because of my friend Jerome. Jerome is a journalist. He's a former Marine. And he was trafficked right here in the United States. From the age of 5, so kindergarten age, until the age of 12, about middle school, Jerome was trafficked. When he was very young, his parents divorced, and his mother was a severe alcoholic. When she remarried, Jerome's stepfather began selling him to pedophiles for sex and pornography. Now, Jerome will tell you that those 7 years of his life were a living hell. But he'll also tell you that to the outside world, things looked pretty normal. He went to school, played with kids in the neighborhood, and I have to wonder, during those 7 years, didn't somebody, a teacher, a parent, a neighbor, a school nurse, somebody, notice the terrible condition that this child was in? There had to be some sign. Now, maybe there was, and he just didn't know what to do about it. When I think of Jerome, my mind also goes back to Thailand and little boys about that age, 8, 9, 10 years old. The Thai fishing industry is rife with human trafficking. The fishermen take young boys out onto their boats because those children are light, they're quick, they can take a lot of them out, and their lives are cheap. They literally work some of those boys to death. And the fishermen know that all they have to do is return to shore, and there's plenty more where that came from. Now, just to be clear, when I talk about human trafficking, I'm talking both about sex trafficking, which most of us know about because it gets a lot of media play, and labor trafficking, which is what those boys on those fishing boats in Thailand experience. And actually, labor trafficking globally is a much bigger problem than sex trafficking is. So, what do? Well, we educate ourselves, and we make sure that those in our circle of influence are also educated. One organization that I am particularly in love with is Polaris Project, polarisproject.org. They do fabulous work here in the United States on human trafficking. If you go to their website, they have a very nice, concise list of signs to look for human trafficking. Read it, share it. Another organization is Red Light Traffic. Red Light Traffic. These people have created a free app for smartphones that allows anyone to report a person, an incident, or a business where they think human trafficking is occurring. You can do this anonymously. The information goes to the National Trafficking Hotline. They then send it to the appropriate law enforcement agencies. It's one more step towards ending trafficking. This beautiful piece of art behind me is by my friend Pamela Alderman. It's called The Scarlet Cord, and it's actually just a small portion of a much larger work that she did for Art Prize 2014. Now, Pamela worked with another organization that I like. It's War International, or Women at Risk International, although they work with more than women. Now, I happened to be in the office of the president of War International last year, just a couple of weeks before Art Prize. And she had just taken a call from Homeland Security, and they were alerting her to let her know that one of the most prosperous pimps in the United States was in Grand Rapids scouting rental properties for brothels so that he could set up for Art Prize. Now, Pamela's work with Scarlet Cord is currently in Phoenix, Arizona for the Super Bowl. What most people don't realize about large events like this, the Super Bowl and Art Prize, is that whenever you have a large gathering of people who have a lot of money to spend, And underneath that legitimate good time, that party that's going on, underneath that, there's always human trafficking. Now, War International works in over 40 nations, including the US. And they work to educate people, to try and keep them out of human trafficking situations. They work with women and children who are in traffic situations. They walk alongside them to let them know that they have a friend, that they have a place to go. So if and when they are able to escape that situation, they know that they'll be safe. Once those people are out of the traffic situation, Women at Risk International helps educate them so that they have a way to honestly and healthily support themselves and their families and not get re-trafficked. Now, I started out by telling you that I was here as an unwilling expert and as a very mad mom. So I'd like to tell you about my daughter. I'll call her Mimi. That's her family nickname. 3 years ago to this day, Mimi was 16 years old. She has bipolar disorder and she's cognitively impaired. So she functions at about the level of a third grader. She was at school in Grand Rapids and she got into trouble. She was angry, and so she walked out of her classroom. She walked out of her school. She walked a few blocks, and then she disappeared. I can't begin to tell you what my husband and I went through. Frantic doesn't even begin to cover it. We put her name and her picture on Facebook. We were making phone calls. We were driving up and down streets day and night in Grand Rapids. We just had no idea where she was. 2 days later, I got a phone call from the police saying that they had recovered her. She was at the YWCA, and would I come? So I did. And what I found was a very broken and very shattered girl. For the first 5 days after we got Mimi back, she couldn't talk. She did scream. And for the next several months, my husband and I and many other people tried desperately to help Mimi put the pieces back together again. But we just couldn't. And ultimately, we ended up having to have her hospitalized for 4.5 months. Now, I'm very happy to tell you today that my Mimi is a very happy, whole, beautiful, wonderful girl. And she has come so far in these 3 years. She is the bravest person I know. We found out later that when she had walked those 3 blocks from school, a man approached her and said, "You're too beautiful to be out here by yourself on a cold day without a coat on. Why don't you come inside and get warmed up?" And she did. And he gave her some beer, and then he raped her repeatedly. And then he passed her on to some friends who did the same. Eventually, in that 48-hour time period, she was taken to a house with several other young girls. They all had their clothes taken away from them, and they were photographed, presumably for sale on the internet. And they were locked in. Now, like I said, my Mimi is a very brave girl. She waited until one of those men fell asleep, and she stole the key out of his pocket, grabbed the sheet off of her bed, and she ran. Now, she didn't know where she was, so she hid in an abandoned building. Someone found her. We don't know who it was a man. But he realized that this was a person in deep distress. He got her help, and that's how we got her back. As I said when I started, my whole reason for being here today is to let you know that each and every one of you can be the hope for someone who is caught in the web of human trafficking, just like someone was for my Mimi. So, be that hope. Be that hope for for Ellie, for Jerome, for Mimi. Be the hope for all the victims of human trafficking. Thank you.